That was making headlines on the People Daily. The front page there says greedy MPs get hefty salary rise. And it is disdain a day after President Ruto admitted insensitive state spending and heeded to demands by young Kenyans to scrap some offices. House leaders have now been awarded more perks. That story continues on page 4 of the People Daily. And so as it stands, Kenyan lawmakers are in line for a hefty salary increment starting this month, even as Kenyans demand that the government effects budget cuts and other austerity measures. And this is an increment that's likely to trigger public uproar. A Gazette notice by the SRC states that monthly remuneration structures for state officers in the Senate and the National Assembly are to be implemented in the financial year 2024-2025, effective the 1st of July. And so in this new structure by the SRC, the two speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate, Moses Wetangula and Amason Kingi, respectively, will from this month receive a gross salary of 1.2 million shillings. This is up from 1.1 million, while the deputies will earn about 966,000, up from about 948,000 shillings. There are many more set to benefit from this salary rise. These include the National Assembly Deputy Speaker Gladys Boss-Shulei, a Senate counterpart as well, Kathuru Murungi, and a whole list, including the leaders of majority and minority parties who will also respectively receive a pay rise there. So SRC, remember, says this is monthly remuneration structures for state officers. And this, of course, comes just after President Ruto maintained that salary increments will have to wait until the Remuneration Commission's report with the country now, of course, in a situation where budget cuts have been promised by President William Ruto. Now, last year, President William Ruto actually rejected a proposal by the SRC to increase his own salary and that of other state officers, citing, among others, lack of equity. All right. And SRC had proposed to increase Ruto's salary from his current 1.4 to 1.5 million, among others, something that he refused. But this particular pay rise for legislators is likely to trigger quite a lot of public uproar, coming at a time when Kenyans are struggling to make ends meet, prompting bloody street protests that have been organized by infuriated youth. We'd like to know what you think about this report. And of course, on page 5 of the People Daily, even as that happens, Gen Z resume Tuesday demonstrations. Now, Kenyans are expected to be back on the streets today to protest against the Finance Bill of 2024. And this is especially the Gen Z who are unhappy, as they say, with President William Ruto's leadership, and they have vowed to sustain the protests to today and Thursday as well. But with President William Ruto on Sunday night assuring that the Kenya Defence Forces would not be deployed in these protests if the demonstrators were peaceful. He said the police will be ready to, in fact, escort and provide security to the protesters. And the president also warned that police will be there to deal with criminal elements who would want to infiltrate the protests and destroy property and cause chaos. Now, there's been a rallying call, even on social media, among organizers of these protests to ensure that criminal elements do not infiltrate the protests and undermine the message and the cause of the protests altogether. But all eyes are on President William Ruto today and the security officials as to how they will conduct themselves with regard to the protests. Many questions have been raised with regard to police brutality, excessive use of force and arbitrary abductions across the country. And we saw the president distance himself from those, saying that the police is an independent institution and he will leave them to do their job. And so we'll be watching what happens there. But take a look at page 6 of the People Daily, and it says CS peaks remain in oblivion after Ruto discards lot. And Two former governors now and a former nominated senator are among those big names likely to remain in the political cold after President Ruto abandoned his earlier resolve to appoint chief administrative secretaries. And the scrapping of the position was one of those demands that had been made by Gen Z protesters on the government to cut its expenditure. Take a look at that report. Other budget cuts or austerity measures there, President William Ruto, include cutting budget allocations or scrapping budget allocations altogether to the office of the First Lady as well as the Second Lady, or the spouse of the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. And when you take a look at the corner of page 6 there, you see Gachagua advises MPs to apologize to voters. That's on page 6 of the People Daily as well. And Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is advising MPs who voted yes for the finance bill to return to their constituencies and apologize to voters for failing to read the public mood. Right? And that's an interesting development. And this is after the DP tried to defend these MPs, so to speak, saying that they were only doing the work of the party and what the government of the day wanted to do. But the amount of backlash that has been directed towards members of parliament, especially those who voted yes, specifically those who voted yes, really, has continued to elicit mixed reactions. Many members of parliament are unable to go back to their constituencies as a result of the public anger. And the DP says the only way out is to face the people because they are the ones who gave you the job. All right. So let's finish up with the People Daily with page 10. And that is the cartoon there. And that's my favorite part of the People Daily, really. And it is a picture of the clergy, on one hand, saying, praise God, holding the Bible, and on the other hand, praise my government, and holding a whole bag of dirty money. There it is on the screen. And we have Mwananchi and Wanjiku saying, is it politics in church or church in politics? I saw a report earlier this week detailing how the Gen Z have taken the church back to God. By essentially ensuring that members of parliament and politicians do not take to the pulpit and do not take part in harambes, ensuring that church leaders especially shun what they term as dirty money from politicians. So do let us know what you think of that cartoon there. The hashtag is New Dawn. Speak to us on X at K24TV. Have the Gen Z taken the church back to God? And they say they're fixing the country and many other things in the country. But let's take a look at what's making headlines on the Standard newspaper. And the front page of the Standard says, between a rock and a hard place. That is President William Ruto, who has many tough decisions to make. The youth today have a plan to occupy everywhere, according to this article on the Standard, to honor their fallen comrades and put pressure on the government on matters governance. The new budget cycle, remember, began yesterday. That is the 1st of July. And there's been, questions as to what the head of state will do next, with Kere now set to use old laws or the finance bill of 2023-2024 to collect revenue. But this has put the head of state in a catch-22 situation. What will he do next? He's talked about possibly borrowing 1 trillion Kenyan shillings, a decision or proposal that has received a lot of backlash, even from members of parliament themselves. And so it says here, many voices of Ruto, and it's a special report on page 4 and 5. President William Ruto, they're trying to empathize, at some point exhibiting anger, at another he was calm and collected as he spoke to the nation during that interview on Sunday night. But many largely felt that the president lacked empathy for the lives lost and the cause that, the reasons really that Kenyans were on the street. So that continues on pages 4 and 5 of the Standard newspaper. But on the front page there, it also says, Mandago in court over education fund. Now, the official who chairs the Uasin Gishu County Education Revolving Fund has distanced himself from the controversial fund that allegedly swindled parents over 1.1 billion shillings, saying that he did not actually chair the fund that sought to take students abroad. And that's why it continues on page 13 of the paper. And this is among the corruption cases that have been brought up, even by the Gen Z, in the quest to seek change, calling for an end to rampant corruption, as importantly, miss Daily Nation as Ruto's budget doublespeak. Treasury to implement budget cuts across both the national and county governments. His push for more borrowing beats the very purpose which the austerity measures were intended to achieve. That's a story that continues on page 4 of the Daily Nation. And remember, we've seen a section of members of parliament from the Budget Committee of the National Assembly question the doublespeak. Why borrow more if we are looking to institute austerity measures and budget cuts? Now, remember, the president had directed Treasury to cut total spending for the current financial year by about 346 billion shillings. But on Sunday, claimed that borrowing by the state would increase by 1 trillion shillings following the withdrawal of the Finance Bill of 2024. And this is a doublespeak, so to speak, according to many observers who say that this beats the budget. But President William Ruto says we've dropped the finance bill, and so it means that we've gone back almost 2 years and are going to borrow 1 trillion shillings to be able to run the government. We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Speak to us on X at K24TV. The hashtag is New Dawn. And if the president increased the borrowing target to 1 trillion, the country's total spending would remain at 3.9 trillion shillings. And so essentially, many say this again beats the point, because we are essentially looking to cut spending and cut back on the budget. So this is one of the conversations that President William Ruto has expressed willingness to discuss with the Gen Z. He's expressed his willingness to have an X space with Kenya's youth on Thursday, and it is yet to be seen whether this will actually happen and what the dynamics of that X space will be as the digital revolution takes charge. But the top page of the Daily Nation, we have a report that says that no police officer has been killed in Haiti. This is according to Inspector General of Police Koome, who refutes social media claims of attacks on 7 officers, 7 Kenyan officers in Haiti. Now, these are claims circulating on social media that the Inspector General has termed as unfounded and unpatriotic, as well as malicious. He says Kenyan officers have been working closely with their host, the Haitian National Police. It's a report that we are keeping a close eye on as that deployment takes shape. But let's take a look at us making headlines on the front page of the Star newspaper now. And the front page says, new generation hell for old guard in 2027. Now, youth, known as Gen Z, have sustained the Ruto must go countrywide protests. But you know, we're all youth. We may not all be Gen Z. Some of us millennials want to be included in this youth bracket as well. But we're discussing the Gen Z specifically, who have sustained the Ruto must go countrywide protest. And the story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. The young people are agitating for sweeping changes in the country's political leadership. I remember speaking to some of them yesterday, and they raise concerns of commitment or goodwill to implement even the decisions or recommendations that will be reached upon in the wake of dialogue with President William Ruto. Many point to the NADCO report, for example, that was a culmination of the street protests called by the opposition Azimio la Umoja coalition. There's been many concerns with the implementation of the recommendations of that report, and so many youth now do not want just the talk. They also want to see the walk. And so it remains to be seen how the protests will take shape today. Many of them saying they are coming to pay tribute for who they call fallen soldiers, those who lost their lives in the wake of the anti-tax demonstrations. And remember, the number remains unclear. President William Ruto in that media roundtable on Sunday night put the number at 19, which is, as he says, is what security agencies have given him. But human rights organizations, as at last night, actually put the total number at 39 of those who have died in the wake of the 2-week-long anti-tax bill protests. And so we continue to watch and see whether security officials will provide security to peaceful protesters, as has been promised by President William Ruto. As we wind up, there's a report on page 6 of the Star newspaper that says, when it rains, it pours. And President William Ruto is now under pressure to overhaul his government. And it's another promise, really, that he made during that media roundtable. He actually said, watch this space, alluding to a massive shake-up in his administration. It's yet to be seen what that will mean. But there has been growing calls for a cabinet reshuffle and perhaps even resignation or firing of several state officials that Kenyans feel have not performed and delivered the services as required. Let us know what your thoughts are on that as well. But also, we have a story there at the bottom of the Star newspaper that says female rangers are breaking barriers to conserve wildlife. It's a different story from really the mood of the country that revolves around the push for change and these street demonstrations. The story continues on page 17 of the paper and talks about the power of female rangers who are breaking barriers, coming together to conserve wildlife in the region. We'd like to hear your thoughts on this and much more of what's making headlines on the dailies. We'd like to wind up with just one more picture in the front page of the People Daily, and that's at the bottom there. As it says, Kenya's brace for second round of anti-Ruto protests by youth. And this continues on page 5 of the People Daily. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the conversation on social media as well, especially the hashtag Ruto must go. President Ruto did speak to that as well in that interview Sunday night, saying it is their right. It is a right of Kenyan protesters to push for change, even under that push to have him step down from office. And among the things that Ruto has bowed to pressure to, when you take a look at page 5 of the People Daily, as a result of these demonstrations, he has bowed to pressure, vowing to constitute an IEBC team in 10 days. How achievable is that really? But he has vowed to put in place a fully constituted electoral commission within 10 days, addressing just one of the 14 demands raised by Gen Z protesters last week. And much more to be discussed in that promised X space on Thursday. But protesters had demanded that the president reconstitute the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission within 30 days to facilitate their move to recall rogue members of parliament and hold fresh elections as well. And this is a matter of concern because there are Kenyans who have lacked representation for over a year as a result of lack of a properly constituted IEBC, especially those in Banisa constituency. And it's been a key issue in the ongoing nationwide protests. President revealed that he had received a parliamentary report authorizing him to appoint new commissioners, and that is something that is likely to shape the news in the next week as we take a look at the process of constituting the IEBC. And remember, MPs last week passed a proposal to change laws aimed at unlocking the crisis at the poll agency, saying that crucial operations have been ground to a halt and that the Secretariat has limits within which they can make decisions on issues such as procurement and spending. And so we've had voters in Mandera, Banisa constituency, and 2 wards in Western Kenya that are yet to replace their MPs and MCAs, and the seats have been empty for months. So it is something we will wait to see in that reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So what are your thoughts really on these anti-tax protests that are set for today? Let's take a break here on New Dawn. That's what's making headlines on the dailies. When we come back, the big conversation on opportunities for youth in Kenya's MSME sector. And this comes as Kenyans and especially youth take to the streets calling for change, calling for economic growth, calling for decent jobs that they expect that the Kenya Kwanza government will deliver. So this morning we'll be speaking to Principal Secretary, State Department for MSME Development, Susan Mangeni, on those opportunities, how the government has put policies in place and how these policies are impacting Kenyans. Are they impacting Kenyans at all? We'll be discussing that and much more on the other side of the break. The hashtag is New Dawn. Do stay with us.
When it's a Saturday, there's only one entertainment show in East and Central Africa. Arena 254.